concerned about is, I've been on council now for a number of years, and I continually see the same people over and over and over not paying their utility bills. And I think it's time that we, as a council, look at, you know, why is that continuing to happen? It's $30,000 that we're not getting. Eventually, you get it back.
Correct.
But we're also not a bank. And taxes are, and fees and water and sewer are part of what you have as a civic responsibility in this, to be a part of this city, whether you're a business, and a number of these are business owners in town, and a number of them are residential owners. So I would ask that we place that list on the website, and secondly, that staff do some research on what we could do next year towards fees or caps, or a way of trying to come up with a better system so that we don't continue to get those 25, 30 people over and over not paying their utility bills.
Absolutely.
It is too late to change the ordinance,
Yeah.
correct? To get this
Well,
on tax rolls?
for this assessment
Right.
role, yeah. Yep, that is correct.
We'd have to look going forward.
I would suggest that we remove the names from the list and have just the addresses, like what would be in here. Just kind of a gut thing for me. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that, but if you make that public, just addresses only.
Was last year,
The names?
yes.
Just my thoughts. I don't know what the rest of the
Other
council thinks,
comments, thoughts?
It might, what you call it, ghosting? It might turn people around to pay prior to going on the tax rolls. There's a short period of time. When's this have to be in, by the end of the month?
Well, I mean, this would be submitted to Hennepin County with any alterations if anyone paid today, and there were a few that did, that would be removed from this list. They'd be sent into the county tomorrow, but in terms of how we publish it on our city website, we can do that whenever. So if city council would like us to provide names or not provide names, we can do that right away tomorrow as well. So that doesn't make a difference.
Do we, the only concern with names is, do we know that those are the account holders? It's not just,
Well, we go by property owner.
Okay.
Because it is a property tax and assessment, so
Mhm.
what you do find sometimes is that you could have a property that's being rented out and a
That was
renter
my
wouldn't
thought
pay.
exactly.
Mhm.
It's still the responsibility of the property owner to make sure that those utilities are being paid for this exact reason.
Mhm.
Some of them are caught off guard, some of them are aware of it.
But they all did receive a letter.
Correct.
Correct.
And the
were
property
made aware
owners
of-
did,
Mhm.
so,
Because sometimes the property owner might be Minneapolis.
Well,
Right, but
and
the letter
that's-
went to the property
Went to
owner,
the-
not
went
to
to
the
the property
renter,
owner. Was it
for
certified?
example.
Was it
The
first
mailings,
class?
I'm not sure if I'm not sure if we certified them or not. We didn't get any returned that I'm aware of.
And it's published in the paper too, under public notice.
Say, there was one return, but I got a hold of the person, and so that was the only one.
It's not something new if you're a property owner and you rent out though. It's,
Mhm.
this is how it goes in every city. It's not unique to Maple Plain by any stretch.
I might lean more towards Dominic. An address might be sufficient.
Okay, I'm hearing 2 for address. And 1, Caitlin.
I'm okay either way. It's public information, but I think there are concerns with conflicting names. Sorry. I really, if it's public information, we can publish it, so.
Okay. I guess I'm leaning towards it's public information. Last year, the names were posted. It's a way of keeping people accountable, and it's not fair for
Mhm.
the residents to carry, other residents. So, Caitlin, Councilmember Cahill, you've got to take a stand one way or the other.
I'm fine with publishing it.
All right,
Yep.
then we would like to go forward.
Staff will,
Mhm.
we can replace this in the packet, otherwise we can make it a focal point on our website. We can replace it in our.
I don't think it needs to be
replace
made a
it in our
focal
pack.
point.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
let's
Can't,
replace it.
can't we vote on this as it is, and then
This is-
sometime in
yeah.
December, make some kind of Motion
Mhm.
to post it on the website, keep it separate from this resolution?
Yeah, I would take it as, this was more of a direction that was given.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not so much of a motion that would require a vote in terms of how we handle the publishing of this. But the resolution would need
Yeah.
vote, obviously.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yep, two separate things we're doing. Right. Any further discussion?
I'd move, Madam Mayor, that we approve Resolution 17-1127-01, a resolution certifying delinquent water and sewer accounts as special assessments.
All right, there's a motion on the table. Looking-
Can I just get it with the condition that states
Oh.
that if any,
Yeah, they're not
any,
Assumed.
yeah,
Yes.
assumed. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion.
I second that.
We have a second by Rhoda, and this is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Cahill.
Aye.
Councilmember Fay.
Aye.
Councilmember DeLuca.
Aye.
Councilmember Broda.
Aye.
Mayor Moskowski.
Aye.
The ayes have it. 5-0.
Next, we have Resolution 17-1127-02, Deferred Assessment 1715 Bud Avenue North.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. The resolution you have before you and some attached documents is regarding the property at 1715 North Bud Avenue. The property belongs to Barbara Ingersoll. And this is pertaining to, in our September 25th meeting, we passed a resolution along with a assessment roll that provided a assessment on a street and utility project for Bud Avenue North that was done in 2016. The resolution that was approved at the September 25th meeting was a deferred special assessment resolution, so it provided criteria that residents could apply for to defer their assessment that pertain to the street and utility improvements if they meet certain criteria. One resident, Barbara Ingersoll at 1715 Bud Avenue North, did submit criteria. If you notice in the packet, she states pertaining to hardship, pertaining to, she does meet the age requirement and is claiming financial hardship as well. A document in the packet is a Tennyson warning, and that warning states that confidential private information was shared with City Council a few weeks ago. That information is not public, and the Tennyson warning made it so that it could be shared with Council. That information will not be disclosed tonight, but is information that helped with the decision-making process by City Council. So this resolution here would provide a deferred assessment for Barbara Ingersoll at property 1715 Bud Avenue North for 30 years, or until the property owner no longer qualifies for a deferred assessment, or if the property owner changes. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions pertaining to this resolution and any concerns from council.
I have one question, very simple.
Absolutely.
Is the deferred time frame 30 years, I know that's by state statute, is that the same as the time frame that the folks that aren't being deferred in
No.
this? It's not.
No, so we have a 20-year assessment going on for what we certified to the other property owners. The state statute, it lists it out for 30 years, so that's what it is.
Well, it can be up to 30 years.
It's up to 30 years. I mean,
Why did we make it different?
there's really no rhyme or reason to it. I don't know if it would impact this property if we had it to 20 years or 30 years. I suppose that could be up to council's own thoughts on this. If they wanted to make it 20, they could. What it really comes down to is that the following property owner could still claim financial hardship regardless. So if the property did change, and let's say that the owner of the new this property said, I have a financial hardship and I qualify for a deferred assessment as well, they could apply to City Council to get that moved over to them as well. That is another option that's out on the table, but they have to provide that they do meet our qualifications that we've laid out.
Under what conditions do you no longer qualify for a deferred assessment?
So it would be, so if, let's say the property owner changed, or let's say that Barbara won the lottery tomorrow, she wouldn't be able to claim a financial hardship anymore. And so it's, or if the property did change and let's say a relative now owns the property and they're under the age requirement that we laid out as well, they wouldn't qualify for the deferred assessment. Or if they did meet the age requirement but no longer had a financial hardship and couldn't prove that they had a financial hardship, then there is an issue there as well.
So is the assessment deferral for the property or for her?
It's a kind of a bit of both. So it is for her, but it's also tied to the property. But if the property changes, the option still remains on the property, but you have to prove that hardship still. So it's a little bit of both. For sure, Barbara, but the option still remains if there is a change.
And does interest continue to accrue during this deferral period?
Yes.
John, I've got a question for you, because I know when we discussed that original resolution that got this in motion, I talked specifically about if there's a change in life circumstances, does the deferral, do they have to would they have to show us that they no longer qualify for the deferral? I use specifically, we're sending a soldier off to Afghanistan, he can get a deferral, he comes back. He's back in employment. I never got the impression that that deferral would automatically, he'd automatically disqualify from that. And now you're saying that that is in fact the case. You win the lottery, you come back from the armed services.
Right, when the status, the basis for the deferral, if that changes, it can, the status of it being deferred can be changed and would be changed. So in Bobby's example, winning the lottery would be one. The most common, of course, is transfer of ownership. And if that Bobby correctly states that if that new owner applied for and received the same status, the assessment would remain deferred. But if not, it would apply immediately at that point with any interest that had accrued.
I was very cautious about getting into a policing kind of environment where we're saying, hey, 3 years ago you did this, and we suspect that's no longer the case. I don't want to have to get into that position.
Well, you can do as much or as little as you want, but most cities will build in that provision to give yourself options. It doesn't have to be a situation where you're investigating every single property in this case, but if you're given good evidence to suggest that the circumstances have changed, then you can act upon that evidence.
Philosophically, this 20 versus 30, because even though the original resolution was specific to this development or this reconstruction, we have one that applied for a deferral, which means if we create a new ordinance or a new resolution in the future for future projects, no, they're going to come back and say, you gave her 30, I want 30, but everyone else is only getting 20.
Well, I mean, yes, there is a precedent setting that could occur there. You can change that depending, a lot of this is discretionary in general. I mean, the reality is that city council, as a body, you guys act on whether someone qualifies for a deferred payment or a deferred assessment or not. This resolution is specific to the property at 1715. If that were to alter in the future, that's a hard argument for someone to make just because of the amount of discretion of whether city council would offer a deferred assessment or not. That's completely up to city council. So-
And that's fine. I've read the numbers. My philosophical concern is that you two made the discretion to make this particular one 30 years, and the other 17 members on Bud are going across at 20. And was it an effort to make it less of a hardship, or?
We all gave that direction. That came from all of us.
We
The 30?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we,
Okay.
we talked about that. That's what I recall.
Me too, yeah.
That we gave that
approved
direction.
the stipulations of this
Mhm.
a couple
Well,
months ago.
and in all honesty, if, you know, Barbara self-disclosed that she's 87 years old.
Yeah.
If she lives
Correct.
to be 108, I'll be happy to give her that deferral
Yeah.
for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Well, but the reality is that if the property does change title, or, you know, property owners change, that timeline is the timeline. So, let's say, 25 years go off, without a change of title, and then all of a sudden on that 25th year, a change of title happens. That option for that deferred assessment exists on that property for only 5 years. There's not like a re-up of another
And
30
pending their
years.
approval.
If
It's
the-
understanding.
They'd
I'm
have to
just,
resubmit
you know,
everything.
and to Mike's comment, 20 years from now, if she lives to be 107, have it, you know?
Yeah.
I'm talking about Howard and Independence and,
Yeah, no, I think it's, I mean, certainly I understand the concern there. It was part of the deferred assessment resolution criteria that we had in September that we laid out, but we made it very clear that this was not a universal policy towards the city, but specific only to this street. And I think what the city, what we found is that street projects obviously are highly expensive, and each project has been a little bit different for the city. So Main and Rainbow was very different than Bud Avenue. You couldn't compare them to apples and oranges based off of the project. So I think you want to leave a little bit of discretion for city council in terms of dictating some of
and I'm
these
well
things.
aware of that. And I don't remember ever reading or the 30. I just assumed we would be making it the same, which is why I asked, are they the same? Well, they're not.
Correct.
We can change it for the next round.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Yeah, Councilmember Fay, my recollection during the discussions was we brought forward kind of a general understanding of kind of what had been done in some other cities and had a discussion about that. And the direction that we were given was to use 30 for this one. And then you'll get kind of another bite at the apple when we do a more formal policy.
We
We
may-
can discuss it at that point. You'll still maintain discretion on policy decisions. Policies can change for different reasons. As far as setting precedent, there's always different reasons why you would do different things based on what you've learned from doing it in the past. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think this was made based on the discussions during the work session regarding the policy that we're using for this particular role, only because we had to get it in by resolution quickly before we could actually have a formal policy, which will come later.
Fair enough.
Any further discussion? All right, then I am looking for a motion to approve resolution 17-1127-02, deferred assessment on 1715 Bud Avenue North.
Madam Mayor?
Oh, sorry.
I apologize, very briefly, I think there's a typo maybe just in the third whereas statement. If we want to add "are eligible" at the end of that statement after hardship.
After hardship?
Yeah, I think I think that's what it's meant to say, it's just, I don't see that language there. So we're stating what the policy says, but we kind of state the policy would be a hardship. And
Would you please reread that, how it would
so
be?
basically, it would say, whereas the deferral policy states persons of 65 years of age or older or retired by virtue of a permanent and total disability, or by persons who are members of the Minnesota National Guard or other military reserves and are ordered into active military service, for whom such payment of such special assessments would be a hardship, are eligible, would be the addition, and,
Okay.
then move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's.
all right, thank you for clarifying that. All right, so with that change in the addition, looking for a motion.
I moved to make that motion
Thank
that
you.
you stated with the corrections.
Thank you, Councilmember Broda.
You're
Looking for a
welcome.
second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Cahill. This is a resolution vote.
Councilmember Fay,
Aye.
Councilmember DeLuca,
Aye.
Councilmember Broda,
Aye.
Councilmember Cahill,
Aye.
Mayor Moskowski.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0.
And we have another resolution this evening. This one is Resolution 17-1127-03, Independence Street, speed limit reduction in school zone.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I hope you guys are having fun with the resolutions. We got a lot of them tonight. But what you have tonight in front of you is West Hennepin Public Safety Director Gary Krales did a traffic study on the street of Independence Street, right outside of the building here in Discovery Center, from Bud Avenue North to Howard Avenue. And a couple of patterns were found about traffic use on the street, and by some observance, some higher speeding vehicles above and beyond 30 miles per hour. As a result, it has been recommended by the West Hennepin Public Safety Department to enact a 20 mile per hour speed limit sign when children are present for a section of Independence Street here, before and after the school building, to give notice to drivers. This study was conducted and showed that there are times throughout the day where there's a lot of traffic at this building, and with that sometimes is a rush to get out of here. And so for the protection of children being present, which is so very common on this property, we're asking for a resolution that gives the authority for the West Hennepin Public Safety Department to enforce a speed limit of 20 miles per hour when children are present. Without a resolution, you can't enforce a speed limit change from 30 to 20 miles per hour. So there is a process that we've been following that the state mandates. A traffic study needs to be done, that has been completed, and now a resolution by City Council needs to be approved in order for us to enforce the speed limit reduction. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions pertaining to this topic.
Is there a reason why we do when children are present versus just lowering the speed limit?
The main reason that we do it is that a school day typically is 8 hours a day, and there's another 16 hours in a day that they're not present, and it isn't a factor, and the children aren't there. So the state statute says that when children are present is what most school zones go with, to give people the regular speed limit during the non-school day times, including holidays, weekends, and so that's why most put when children are present. I mean, John and I have spoken, and we've kind of talked with our patrol officers about what does when children are present mean, and we're very clear on that means either within the area, outside, recess, in and out of vehicles, near Independence Street. That's kind of the criteria that we're going with, visibly present.
My understanding is around this building, you have children from as early as 6:20 till almost 6 o'clock. So as opposed to 8 hours, you're probably talking almost 12,
Right.
5 days a week, activities going on the weekends. I wonder if it becomes confusing for people when they go, is this a 30? Is this a 20? Or do we get people in the habit of just slowing down around here instead of speeding through on this thoroughfare that we have out here? And the nicer the road is, the faster people go.
It is one of our wider roads in town, if not the widest. So I think when children present is practical for this particular application. If we feel we should change it, we can always change it to the 20 mile an hour without children present. I know it's a little bit more difficult to not have that in the school zone, but I guess I'd turn that over to Attorney John Thames to kind of go through the exact specifics of it.
The statute in question here is 16914, and the authority given under this section that Gary's referencing pertains to school zones, and it gives the council greater discretion. Actually, if this had been a trunk highway, for example, MnDOT has full authority. We have no say in it whatsoever, and they'd have to do their own analysis and their own determination. In this case, on the basis of a hazard identification analysis, which I think Gary and Rick did a nice job with, you really don't, you have that information and you're able to make that call if you think that it's safer to have this zone in front of the school properly marked, and my understanding, I think it is on both sides of it.
It is, yep.
It's advisory until approved by resolution by this body.
And where do we actually start that? I saw the signs up,
Right at the sign.
so at the sign becomes the point.
Yep.
So when you get to the sign,
Mm-hmm.
20.
So you could have children riding bikes, let's say they're a little bit older, an activity here from any of our apartments or homes around the area, and so now you're a couple 100 feet away from the school and there's a child present going to and from the school, that counts. That's the 20-mile-an-hour zone. So,
And that cannot be enforced until we pass the resolution.
that is
So it's-
correct.
okay. Any further discussion or questions? All right, with that, I am looking for a motion for Resolution 17-1127-03, Independence Street, speed limit reduction in school zone.
So moved.
Moved by Cahill,
Second?
second by DeLuca. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember DeLuca.
Aye.
Councilmember Broda.
Aye.
Councilmember Cahill.
Aye.
Councilmember Fay.
Aye.
Mayor Moskowski.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0.
Bobby, will we be sharing somehow with the Discovery Center and the school this new change so that
Yeah, yep,
they can help communicate that to some of the parents too?
absolutely.
Electronic signs so that it's publicized, so that it doesn't become a money generator overnight.
Yeah, I think we're really good at
Okay.
our discretionary practice in the beginning of changes, so
Fair enough.
there'll definitely be warning times.
I think it would also be nice if we could have staff put an article in the newspaper. I understand we'll probably have to submit that ourselves, but just an education awareness piece,
Sure.
too,
Absolutely.
just so people aren't caught off guard. All right. Sticking with our theme this evening, moving on to Resolution 17-1127-04, 2018 polling place location.
Well, this one is the most straightforward of the resolutions. Basically, a state statute was revised requiring every governing body to designate their polling place. So this resolution just says that next year our polling place is going to be here at City Hall.
Any discussion or questions for staff? With that, I am looking for a motion to approve Resolution 17-1127-04, 2018 polling place location.
I move we approve resolution 17-1127-04.
All right, looking for a second?
Second.
Okay. And any further discussion? And a roll call vote.
Councilmember Broda.
Aye.
Councilmember Cahill.
Aye.
Councilmember Fay.
Aye.
Councilmember DeLuca.
Aye.
Mayor Moskowski.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0.
All right. Next, we have Fire Chief Selection 2018, 2020 update, and our administrator will lead this one.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This is not a resolution that we need to approve, but action does need to be taken. Earlier this year, there was a revision to the Maple Plain Fire Department bylaws that stated that instead of a general election that was held yearly by the Maple Plain Fire Department to help determine who the fire chief was, then go to council to be voted upon and decided upon, the process changed. And so that change moved from a election to selection process. As a result, staff as well as Fire Chair Dominic Broda, City Administrator Mark Altus over in Independence, and 3 other firefighters partook in a interview a few weeks ago to determine who the next fire chief would be. We had one applicant who is the current fire chief, Justin McCoy. Justin McCoy did file a city application and did submit all materials required in our bylaw, and was put through an interview process to hopefully become the next fire chief. We did receive fire department feedback. We received 10 members' feedback, all of which were very positive. The 3 members of the fire department that did help with the interview process, all very positive about Fire Chief McCoy. As a result, the interviewing panel has a recommendation to move forward with the appointment of Justin McCoy as the Maple Plain Fire Chief for the next 3 years, starting on January 1st, 2018, and concluding December 31st, 2020. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions from City Council pertaining to the process and the applicant. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for staff? Okay, with that, I'm looking for a motion to approve Fire Chief selection Justin McCoy for 2018 through 2020.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Broda,
Second.
second by Fay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Next, we have Resolution 17-1127-05. Approve the feasibility study for 2018 street and utility improvements and set a public hearing date. I'm going to turn that over to our engineer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a PowerPoint that will run through some different highlights from the feasibility report, and I'll start that at this time. Let's see, Bobby. There we go. So we wanted tonight to talk a little bit about the neighborhood meeting that was held on October 30th, to review the feasibility report and discuss some of the estimated costs, financing, and schedule. Get feedback from the council on some items that we want to be able to share or make any adjustments, and then to approve the resolution and set the public hearing. The neighborhood meeting, once again, was held on October 30th. And I thought about today when I got out of my car, it sure would have been nicer weather to hold it on November 27th, but October 30th was our date, and it was cold, but there was approximately 18 residents, several council members, et cetera, that were able to make it. And some of the main items that were discussed were kind of some specifics on drainage issues at a few places along the project. There was discussion on the rear drainage between Howard and Perkins, and some of the council might recall a few years ago, the residents along, and it seemed like it was mostly along Perkins, had complained about this rear yard drainage between them and Howard. And so that was something that one of the property owners did bring up. There was discussion on the street widths, and in general, the residents along Howard were okay with the existing street width, which is in that like 25-foot range, maybe close to 26. One of the things we did bring up with them is that, you know, on some of your streets where you do have a 26-foot wide road, the city has looked at restricting parking to one side. And at that point in time, at least in the neighborhood meeting, people didn't express concerns on that. So I think that's something we'll discuss at the feasibility report and just make people aware of that. There were some questions on buried power lines, type of curb. People didn't feel there needed to be sidewalk. And there was a discussion on the width of Independence Street and possibly a bike trail. And I think in the past, as the police chief had mentioned, you know, Independence is one of our wider streets, and the city had looked at on street bike trail in the past. And at this point in time, we haven't went more into that discussion on Independence Street. It kind of depends on maybe the width that you might decide to build that at, but we could certainly bring that up at the feasibility report stage, or I mean, the public hearing stage of the feasibility report and during design. So those were some of the highlights of the neighborhood meeting. Once again, our project location goes from Howard Avenue from Main Street east to Drake Street, and Independence Street from Howard Avenue to Baker Park Road. The utility improvements associated with the project is sanitary sewer, and the existing sanitary sewer is clay in this area. It was placed in approximately the 1950s, and as you're aware, that you do have poor condition on your clay sanitary sewer pipe with I&I throughout the city. We are proposing to replace all the clay pipe with PVC sanitary sewer, but there is a stretch right between, I should have had my laser pointer, I didn't, sorry about that, I'll get Oh, Mark's gonna help me out there, but you see on Independence between Node 179 and 34, that is a stretch that, oh, thanks, Mark. Yeah, there is this stretch that Public Works, when they had looked at the tapes, they said if there is a candidate for some lining, which can save some money, this would be the area. And so we did look at some of the costs associated with lining versus total reconstruction, and can talk about that in a little bit. The water main, existing water main is 6-inch cast iron. It was hard to find a specific date, but most of the cast iron in the city was placed around 1939. There are various breaks, and as we notice on some of our pipe, actually ductile iron pipe, which is newer than cast iron, there are some areas of the city that have corrosion. And so the city has, on your last reconstruction projects, just planned on replacing all the water main in the project, and that's what we would do with PVC pipe, which stands up to corrosion better than ductile iron or cast iron. We'd replace services to the right-of-way. During construction, there is that need for that temporary water to give people water while a contractor is ripping up their street. The street and storm sewer improvements, in general, the streets are in poor condition, and there's a variety of different drainage issues which we touched on before. The city would look at putting new storm sewer and drain tile. The drain tile is used for draining the road subgrade, as well as a stub for sumps. New curb and gutter would be placed, and then at driveways, we'd put in concrete driveway aprons, similar to what was done on your previous projects. This is kind of showing the street and storm sewer improvements, and I'm indicating this one area. This is where there's an existing kind of rear yard catch basin, and there's a drain tile line, like a 6-inch tile that runs to the east and then runs down Perkins, and some property owners felt it's kind of, the city considers it a private line. It kind of runs here and then runs north and south, and they don't know if it kind of goes across the road. We'll definitely, when Perkins eventually in the future is a project and we reconstruct it, we'll definitely find that with all the excavation work. But I think the question that will be before the council and discussion in the public hearing is, do we stub a storm sewer from Howard to that location at this time, or do we wait until Perkins is reconstructed? It's a little shorter distance, and there already is an existing line that runs along the property line. So I think we can talk about that at the end of the meeting and just get some of your thoughts prior to the public hearing. The typical section, once again, would be reconstructing the streets with new fabric, a foot of sand, 8 inches of class 5, 3.5 inches of asphalt. Once again, the drain tile would be able to be used by people with sumps. The width that we're showing on this is, we're showing 13 to 16 feet for width. The 13 feet would match what Independence is right now. We've talked about it with the property owners and with staff about looking at the option of increasing the width on Independence Street. The 16 times 2 would be 32 feet, so it's not quite as wide as what your stretch of Independence is here by the school, but it would be definitely wider than what it is right now. It'd be around 6 to 7 feet wider, so around 3 feet on each side, 3.5. And that's something we looked at the costs and have that in the feasibility report. The type of curb and gutter, one of the property owners, when we were walking up Howard, talked about the barrier type curb, what we call a B618, where it's a 6-inch lip versus a surmountable curb. And I know the council has discussed that on your most recent projects, your Main and Rainbow area, which was put in at around 26 feet. You did do the surmountable curb. You did do that on Bud also with the surmountable curb. And I think there was some thought that, people when they pull up, you can actually, pull up and drive on the curb a little bit more with surmountable versus the barrier curb. But there was one resident in the neighborhood meeting that just said, I don't like that surmountable curb. I like that barrier type curb. And when you do know where your driveways are going, I mean, you can put the barrier type curb and just drop the curb down at driveways. So it is something that we anticipate there may be some people bringing that up at the public hearing, and wanted to just make the council aware of that. But in general, the last two projects with reconstruction, you have went to surmountable curb on those projects. The estimated project costs are listed here for the sanitary sewer, water, storm sewer, and street. This is the option, which is kind of called option 1 in the report, which doesn't have widening Independence Street to a 32-foot width. So this is $2,029,100. The next sheet kind of just restates that option 1. It does include replacing all the sanitary sewer on the project. If you did do that smaller section of lining, that would save you around $18,600 based on our estimates. So that's option number 2. Option number 3 is if you did, option number 1, but made Independence Street wider, and you can see that adds around $86,500 to your costs. Option number 4 is a wider street on Independence, but still lining, and so you save around $18,600 from option 3. So that's kind of a quick summary of those options that were looked at in the report. As it relates to financing and preliminary assessments, the city will review that with your financial consultant, but in general you've been using bonding, and a combination of bonding, utility funds, and assessments to pay for street reconstruction projects. And we did have a handout that is just a little bit different than what was in the PDF that was sent out last week. And so this would be, we did notice one of the formulas was pulling from the straight frontage, not the adjusted frontage, on a few of the properties, and it made their assessment higher than what is actually on this revised table. So this would be the one that we would, include for the public hearing. But option number 1 is kind of how you've looked at your previous projects, where you kind of look at your sanitary and water main costs. Then you also look at your street and storm sewer costs. You add those together. You use a percentage, and I think the council has, and we'll look for direction from you on this tonight. You can see what the 35% and 50% are on these tables. Sometimes you have looked in the past at showing a 30% or 25%, and so when you use this option and you look at the 35%, you can see where the cost per property owner range from $12,037 to up to $29,000. And as you know from one of your recent projects where you've done your special benefit analysis, that's something that the city has done in the past. And if you use this option, you'd come up with a dollar amount, and then you would have like an adjustment column that would say, well, but we've done a special benefit analysis, and the benefit to these various properties are this, and you'd make an adjustment. But I know the 50% just seems like the 35% gets close to on the lower end, gets closer to your most recent project along Bud. The 50% just definitely seems on the higher side, but I know in the past you presented at a public hearing, and then you let the public know that we'll be doing a special benefit analysis, and we historically have made adjustments to these numbers. The other option that I was showing was, there was a number from your Main Street Rainbow project, which seems like it's maybe the street work and the homes on that project maybe are similar to the homes in this area, but there was like a max benefit of around $14,900 back then for some of the one of the special benefit analysis had, and I just increased that by inflation and showed that would be $16,500. And this option, we haven't really shown that option number 2. It's on the second page of your handout. In the past, we've kind of stuck with the option 1 and then maybe put in some different percentages for assessments. But I just wanted to share that with you, and if that's something the council wanted to look at that option, we could definitely share that with the public at the upcoming public hearing. Some of the other preliminary assessment items that we talk about with the public and the city makes a final decision on when you do your assessment hearing is the period of time, whether it's 10 years or 20 years. I think your last two projects, you've done it over 20 years. The interest rate is usually your, whatever you would sell your bonds for, plus a certain percentage, usually like 1 to 1.5% increase. And the first payment, if this project would proceed as a project in 2018, the first payment would generally be set up for 2019, but that's also a final decision the council can make. And my last item on this slide was just the special benefit analysis timing. I know on one of the last projects, that timing of the special benefit came in like right before the assessment hearing, and we would just encourage, I think, as a staff that, if this project proceeds, that we get that analysis done as soon as possible so that we can share that with the council, and then you can, prior to an assessment hearing, have more time to review things and make some final decisions. The schedule for the project is what we're proposing with the resolution is having the public hearing on December 18th. Based on that, if after you have the public feedback, the council could make a decision that night to order plans and specifications. I know some of the council have asked how this maybe compares to your past projects. This would be about a month and a half, maybe around a month sooner than what you had on your last project on Bud. So it is ahead of that schedule, but you could, if you did the plans on December, we'd bring those plans back in February at your meeting for approval. We'd open bids in March. Construction could begin as early as May, usually when road restrictions are off, and completed in August, September. And we always wait a year to put that final lift on, just in case there's some settlements in your kind of clay soils here in Maple Plains. So the final workhorse would go on spring 2019. And your assessment hearing, you could do that in fall, so that, like around October. But you could wait, and you can make a final decision on that at a later date. So council feedback. This is where I'll stop talking a little bit. But some of these are the items we are looking for feedback on. The sewer lining or replacement. I think some of these items you don't have to make a decision tonight, but it's at the meeting on December 18th as we start on design and to keep things moving, knowing if the council wants to go one way or the other way, if that saving of $18,600 for lining is something you say, hey, that's a benefit, let's look at doing that. And there are options where we could bid it as an alternate too, so you could see how the prices came in. So that would be something we'd want feedback on. The backyard drainage, I think we'll hear from the public, and maybe that can help the council decide, do you want to tie that sewer into Howard, which is a little longer distance, or do you want to wait till Perkins gets reconstructed? If we wouldn't do it at this time, we would definitely put a stub on Independence Street at Perkins, so that a storm sewer stub, so that we can tie that in and we don't have to rip up Independence in the future when Perkins is reconstructed. That street width discussion on Independence and maybe the curb and gutter can wait till the public hearing. Buried power, I know one person brought it up, but it's been something that it is expensive to do that, and there's costs, both for the city as well as property owners to convert their electrical panel over to, they got to usually hire an electrician to make a conversion if you're bringing it in overhead versus underground. And I don't know all the details of that, but I think just the city hasn't done that recently because of some of those costs with residential properties. And then feedback on the preliminary assessment role and what you would like us to show at the public hearing. I think those are some of the main issues. So with that, I'll stop now and answer any questions.
I had one question off the top about the sewer lining. So what kind of time are we going to get out of that lined pipe?
Yeah, I think in what we've seen, I mean, we've been replacing sewers for a longer period of time, but the liners have improved a lot over the years, and so we do anticipate, like if you I mean, your life of a PVC sewer, you figure, is going to be in the 60 to 80 years, and you would anticipate the same on the lining of the sewer, around 60 to 80 years. There's just, there's some, there's some, just a little bit of restriction in size, because it's filling an existing clay sewer pipe, but we aren't planning to expand a lot of growth in this part of the city, so that's not a major issue.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, could you flip back to figure 3, the water mains?
Sure.
Am I just misreading this, but on Independence, is there a chunk that's not being replaced?
Well, there's a stretch between
Howard.
Howard and Perkins where there isn't existing water, so
There
th-
isn't?
there isn't.
How do those residents get water?
Well, I think they either have a service that some of them are maybe fed off of Howard on the corners, but then the other ones, there's like, where's my? There's,
How do they
like.
get water? That's the one I'm looking at.
Yeah, so it must be a longer service that must tie into that line. So for some reason, yeah, that stretch,
Okay.
and we do look during design if
Half
a
of
s-
the neighbor.
if a service is longer, we do look at the diameter of that service. Sometimes you might have to increase it from a 1-inch copper service to an 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch. But yeah, you are correct. There is that stretch there with no water main.
So the existing cast iron pipe is so degraded, you couldn't consider lining that as well as the clay, could you?
Yeah, usually water main, if you have some like large trunk lines, I think like Minneapolis and St. Paul might look at lining, but usually the smaller diameter and the fact that you have like gate bells and all these corps and stuff to try to go in and cut an opening. I mean, you can do it more on sanitary sewer, and that.
Is that the one you were lining, the sanitary sewer?
Yes, the
Oh, I'm sorry,
sanitary sewer.
Let's go back to the sanitary sewer then.
Yeah. Okay. So that's that stretch right. Oops.
On an independent.
Right here. So I think when Harry and Matt had looked at that televising report, and this stuff, they said, yeah, definitely reconstruct, definitely here reconstruct, because there's so many cracks, and they just felt maybe a few sags that we just get it all replaced. But this stretch was one that they felt would be a candidate for lining, and so I think that's why we've kept it in the report and estimated costs and
So you could never get the useful life out of lining the components that you want to reconstruct. You could never get them out of what you are considering lining. Couldn't get the useful life out of it.
Right. The other ones had some different sags or issues that, all this, and that's where the city has done some lining in some of your areas. But if you got sags where, the camera goes underwater, it's just you're going to constantly have a place where a sewer or solids can settle. And so you kind of like to, right, if there's some of those issues, you do look at just replacing those rather than lining.
Now, in terms of the I&I issues with this, is there any more benefit to PVC versus lining, or from a financial standpoint?
Yeah, I think either one is, from an I&I standpoint, your PVC sewer, as long as everything is constructed properly, and we do some tests on that and televising to make sure that a joint hasn't, like when a contractor pushes the pipe together, you could have a joint that rolls, and lining, you don't have that issue because all of it is a solid pipe. But you do have issues where you got to, on the service lines, you got to come back in with a little machine and cut a hole, and sometimes they base it off of original televising report, but sometimes they can get their hole off, and then you have to deal with some issues. So I think in general they're both great from a linings or from an I&I standpoint.
Dan, can you go to the charts that you had, your appendix? What connotates a half of a parcel?
So those are usually corner lot parcels where, you know, say like a property owner that lives at the corner of Perkins and Independence Street, we put a half a parcel, half a parcel there, so when Perkins gets reconstructed, that's when their other half a parcel will be. Now, we didn't when you go over here to Baker Park Road, and I should, the one thing I didn't pull up here on this PowerPoint, I didn't have that, that figure 6 that kind of shows the assessment area and properties, and we'll make sure we have that for the public hearing. But Baker Park Road, because this is a county road, we still included these people as one parcel. We didn't put a half a parcel because generally when the county road gets reconstructed, we aren't anticipating